Okay, now let's look at the single linkage agglomerative clustering with our example. And remember, we are only going to use two variables and only five observations. Okay, so we want to cluster these five observations. So we start with the starting point is each observation is a cluster, right? So there are five clusters. Okay, and so each one is a cluster. Okay, so each one being a cluster, let's assume that we are going to be doing single linkage. That means we want to look at the minimum distance between each cluster, because there is only one observation in each of them. So minimum, maximum, centroid, everything will give you the same result. So once again, the diagonal is going to be 0, and we have only the lower case. So we have already computed these distances previously, and they are right here. So we'll just simply bring that down here. Okay. Okay, so now we have all the distances. So in step 1, so remember, we're going to combine clusters that are closest to each other, right? So what we want is the minimum among all of these different distances. Okay, so which one is the minimum? So you do a min. And that is that one. So that one is the minimum. So which is Arizona and Commonwealth. So step 1 is the two closest clusters. Okay, these clusters happen to be just one observation cluster. The two closest clusters are Arizona and Commonwealth. So join them. Right? So now we have only 4 clusters. So first cluster is Arizona plus Commonwealth. I'll put a comma there. Right? The rest of them are single record cluster. Well, the last one is consolidated. Okay, so these are the 4 clusters at the end of step 1. So now we have to compute the distances between the clusters. Okay, now let's set up the distance matrix. Okay, and the distance matrix is here. Okay, Arizona, and let's order them so that the clusters are together. So Arizona and Commonwealth, and then we have Boston, Central, and consolidated. Right? Then we have Arizona, Commonwealth, and then Boston and Central. So you don't need consolidated again at the end. So now this is one cluster, right? And the rest of them are individual clusters. Okay, so let's look at the distances. Arizona to Boston is that. Arizona to Central and Arizona to Consolidated. Okay, and then Boston to Commonwealth. So Commonwealth to Boston to Central, Central to Commonwealth, so which is that, and Commonwealth to Consolidated is that. Then we also need Central to Boston, okay, Central to Boston, Consolidated to Boston, and then we need Central to Consolidated. Okay, so these are the distances. Okay, and here we don't need the distance inside the cluster with Arizona and Commonwealth. Okay, so now we have the clusters. So we have Arizona Commonwealth, one cluster, Boston, Central and Consolidated. So these are the clusters that we have. Okay, so now we need the distances. We are using single linkage, right? That means minimum distance. So we have Boston, Central and Consolidated. Okay, so what is the distance between Arizona and Commonwealth? That's one cluster. Okay, to Boston, to Central and to Consolidated. So that will be, so this one is the minimum between Boston and Arizona and Boston and Commonwealth. That's your single linkage. If we are using if you're using complete linkage, you'll use max here and not min. Okay, then to Central, then it will be min of Central and Arizona and Commonwealth, and then min of these. Okay, all right. So now we will use the upper triangle because I've set it up in this fashion. So we don't need to do anything on the diagonal. So distance between cluster Boston and cluster Central, there is only one on each side. So there is no min max, everything is the same. Boston to Central will be that. Okay, Boston to Consolidated will be that, and then Central to Consolidated is that. So you don't need that again. All right. So these are the distances. Now again, we have to look for the minimum. Okay, the closest one is what we are trying to look for. So closest clusters equal to closest cluster distance is that. And that happens to be this. So central is the choice. So in step 2, central and the two closest clusters are central and central is one cluster and Arizona and Commonwealth is the other. So now you join them. So now we have only 3 clusters. So this will be 3 clusters. So we have Arizona, Commonwealth and Central. That is one cluster. So we have cluster 1 and cluster 2 is Boston and then consolidated. Now once again you have to repeat the step and do the next joining.